All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Sorry. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Discovery Live. Ask a Scientist. Tonight we are bringing some experts about that are experts in black-footed ferrets to you, so that you can ask them your questions. Again, Discovery Live is a program that we do here at the museum on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, where you get to ask questions of scientists and find out all about their topics of expertise. And tonight is all about black-footed ferrets. So thank you so much for joining us for tonight's program. We are going to get started here and bring on our first two guests. We are going to bring on Guy Graves. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, let's see. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, is that better? Okay, good.
Yep. And along with Guy, we are going to bring on Julie Hogg Hammond. Hi, welcome, Julie.
Hi.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the program. And again, if anyone has any questions during the program, please just feel free to leave those in the comments below, and I will relay those to our special guest tonight so we can get some answers for you guys. But first of all, let's go ahead and start off with some just brief introductions. If you guys want to tell us about yourselves and what your connection to black-footed ferrets is. And Guy, you're to my left here, so why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. Yeah, I have worked with black-footed ferrets since 1990, the year that the Louisville Zoo became involved in the captive breeding effort. Prior to that, I worked with other animals at the zoo, elephants and tigers and polar bears and such as that. But since 1990, I've worked with ferrets, and I have really enjoyed the opportunity to work with an endangered species and to put it back into its native habitat. That's been real rewarding.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Guy. And Julie, why don't you go ahead and give us an introduction for yourself?
So my name is Julie Hogg Hammond. I was 10 years old on the morning that essentially my parents and our family dog killed the first black-footed ferret that kind of started the whole process of them being rediscovered and then eventually brought into captivity for the breeding programs that have taken place.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julie. Wow, that must have been a pretty exciting time. And I'm sure we will have some stories about that as well. For anyone tuning in who is not familiar with black-footed ferrets, can one of you give just a little introduction on what the black-footed ferret is and maybe why it's different from other ferrets that we might have around the world?
The black-footed ferret is the only native ferret to North America. It's native to the Western Plains states. It's distant relatives, of skunks and such. And when they get upset, you can definitely tell that they're in the Mustelidae family. They do not spray, but they can definitely let you know that they are upset.
Interesting. Yeah. And they're the native species of ferret to North America. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And they were thought to be extinct. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
Excellent.
Up until Julie's family found one. Yeah. The last colony prior to that had been in Millette County, South Dakota, and so they thought they were gone. And fortunately for us, Shep found one, and so here we are.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about Shep in particular. Shep was your family dog, I'm guessing, Julie, is that correct?
Yeah. So of course, I grew up on a ranch, and unlike my personal dogs now as an adult, they were outside dogs and took care of, keeping the place safe and letting us know if there was ever any issues. And there was definitely an issue that night. So yeah, Shep was just your typical cow dog. Yeah.
Excellent. And I understand that you guys didn't immediately know that this was a black-footed ferret. Can you describe how that kind of all went down?
Yeah. So fortunately, we've heard the stories many years. I was 10. So I don't know how familiar you are with 10-year-olds, but I'm a teacher. And so 10-year-olds, they don't pay a lot of attention to the minor details. However, what I remember, and it's kind of been confirmed, and luckily in my adulthood, I was able to visit with my dad more and really make sure I kind of had that story down. So Shep had been in a fight with something in the night. And so when they got up, my mom said, yeah, you better go check for some porcupine quills, because it sounded like he got in a fight with a porcupine. And so my dad went out and no porcupine quills, found this dead animal, like a rodent. He didn't know what it was. And so he just threw it over the fence, and he came in. He said, no, it wasn't a porcupine. I don't know what it was. And Lucille Hogg, being the woman that she was, had him go get it. And so he did. And, it looked like a weasel type animal. We hadn't seen one. And my mom thought that was very cute. And she would like to take it to the taxidermist in town and have it stuffed and put on her mantle. And so, and I do really actually remember how the rest of it played out. So we went to town. We lived about 12 miles west of Meeteetse. And we, going to town back then was kind of a big deal. And my dad went into the post office, and we walked across the street, and she kind of relayed the story to Larry LaFrenchi and laid it out on the counter. And he said, I'll be right back. And he went in the back, and I'm assuming he made a phone call. And then when he came back out, he looked at my mom and said, I am pretty sure you have an endangered species on your hands, and I'm going to have to confiscate it. And of course, Lucille's like, what? It's just this little weasel thing. I just want to get it stuffed and put on the mantle. And he said, yeah, no, I'm fairly certain this is a black-footed ferret. And if neither of my parents had heard of a black-footed ferret. And he said, I have to take it. I've got to get a hold of Game and Fish. And then the rest is history. So yeah, that's kind of how that all played out.
Excellent. And Guy, you were pretty instrumental, I guess, in getting the captive breeding program going at the Louisville Zoo. Can you talk a little bit about the beginnings of that?
Yeah, it's changed a bit over the years. When we first got in the program back in 1990, it was in the first years of the program, and since there were so few ferrets, we had to go to pretty good extremes as far as quarantine. So every time I went into the ferret building, I did take a shower, wash my hair. I had hair back then, and I think the ferret program has probably done a good job of cutting down on that. But yeah, take a shower, wash my hair every time I went in the building, and then put on the surgical mask, scrubs, go in and care for the ferrets. And then if I decided to go out for lunch, I had to go through the same process. If I had to run an errand, I had to do the same process. So you became either very organized or you became very clean very quickly. But yeah, in the first years of the program, it was overseen by Game and Fish, Tom Thorne, his wife, Beth Williams. What we did basically came from a lot of what they did. But being a zoo, one thing we ended up doing, is we ended up having a lot of people taking care of the ferrets, because it was a pretty intensive program. And since it's a nocturnal animal, we thought, well, when we do the breeding, we're going to have to put them together at night, because that's what Game and Fish had always done. But we set up some cameras, and we figured out, that they actually breed during the day as well. And so from that point on, we never did another evening introduction. Prior to that, you come in at 9 o'clock, and we might be there until 4 or 5 in the morning, try to breed these guys. So that cut way down on the overtime. So that went, it was some pretty good stead as far as the management went. But yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. What we've learned basically though is the more that we can let the dam, the mom, kind of take care of the kits and do what she needs to do and be as hands off as we can, the better off we can. We can't really do a better job than what she does So our whole goal is to try to be as hands off as we can. We start giving the kits whole carcass prey even before their eyes are open, and they go right after it. And I've heard over the years that these guys are basically on their own at 3 months of age. And I can confirm that they grow really quickly. Like I say, they're eating the whole carcass even before their eyes are open. They grow like little weeds.
That's amazing. So it looks like we have a couple of audience questions here. And the first one that came in from YouTube is from, excuse me if I say this wrong, Kano. And Kano would like to know, black-footed ferrets live in prairie dog towns. Where do they find water from? You guys know that?
I don't honestly know. I'm assuming that they get a lot from the carcass itself. I don't know if there's a certain proximity that they have to stay from, creeks and such. Although some of the areas that, I've seen them released, pretty good distance from water. They get quite a bit of moisture from the prairie dog.
Yeah, I'm sure. So we actually have a couple of other experts that are going to be coming on at 5:30 as well that could maybe answer that question a little more. So we'll save that question in the hopper. Susan on Facebook would like to know, she's curious about the dead black-footed ferret that was found on the hog ranch. And she would like to know, was it mangled or in pretty good shape, and how did Shep kill it?
No, it was not mangled. After they were done with everything they needed to do, it was actually on display in Meeteetse at the bank, and then in our family's restaurant until we closed it. And then it has since been given away, and I think I know where it is, but I'm not going to say in case I'm wrong. I'm assuming Shep killed it like he would have killed anything else by the neck, because there were no visible signs anywhere else of that struggle. But I didn't hear it that night, but from what my mother heard, I mean, that ferret put up a really big fight, especially considering the size of a ferret compared to a dog.
Yeah. And for anyone out there watching, if you haven't been to Meeteetse, Wyoming, it's a very cute little town. I happened to drive through it. I didn't even know I was going to drive through it on my way up to Canada, and stopped for a little photo shoot. And yeah, it's very cute, little museum there and everything. So yeah, definitely get out to Meeteetse if you're out that way. All right, let's see if we got some other audience questions here. So Melissa would like to know, does this program, and I'm guessing the captive breeding program, also keep their food supply healthy?
Do they keep their food supply healthy? Is that what the question was? Okay. Yeah, actually what we do in the captive breeding program, we give them, we don't give them prairie dog, kind of as our usual diet because of, difficulties of obtaining enough prairie dog. We have a prepared meat diet that we give them. Then we also supplement that with a whole carcass prey, usually frozen rats. And what that does is that helps keep their teeth and gums, real healthy, real clean. And then actually before they go out for release, they go out for preconditioning, where they're put in pens exposed to prairie dogs to make sure that they're able to prey on prairie dogs before they actually go out. And that's never been a problem. When we manage them in captivity, we go to, great lengths to make sure that we don't do anything that's going to tame them down. We want to keep them as wild as we can. And, so when they go out in the pens, they know exactly what to do.
Excellent. And the Louisville Zoo is a captive breeding center. Are there other zoos around the country that are also captive breeding centers, or is that kind of unique?
Yeah, well, actually, there's 5 different zoos. There's the Toronto Zoo up in Ontario. There's the Phoenix Zoo, Phoenix, Arizona. Cheyenne Mountain Zoo out in Colorado Springs. The National Zoo, Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute in Front Royal, Virginia. And the Louisville Zoo. And then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has their own captive breeding program building out in Carr, close to Fort Collins. And they've got about one half of the 250, 260 or so ferrets that are in captivity there.
Excellent. Let's see, we've got another question from Facebook. Melissa would like to know, is there still an active colony of black-footed ferrets on the Hogg family ranch?
So let's see, in the summer of 2016, there was the reintroduction of the black-footed ferrets onto the Hogg Ranch and the Pitchfork Ranch. As far as if that colony is active, I actually don't live on the ranch. I don't actually live in Wyoming anymore. I'm actually in Colorado. That is a question I actually didn't even think to ask my brother and sister-in-law before this. So I'm not sure how those ones that were released, how that colony is doing.
Awesome. Well, I know we have Kimberly Frazier on next up, and she might have some more answers about the current status of that colony, I'm guessing. So we'll keep that one in the hopper as well. But yeah, we've got another question from YouTube. Kano would like to know, how closely related are black-footed ferrets and domestic ferrets? Guy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, they're distant relatives. The domesticated ferret is a descendant of the European polecat. It's been domesticated for different purposes, hunting initially. It's been used in lab lately for pet usage. Yeah, they're distant relatives, same general family, but just totally different personalities. You could never just grab a black-footed ferret. It would just tear you up. As opposed to a domestic ferret.
Yeah, awesome. And another question, is there a way to ensure genetic diversity during captive breeding? How do you guys address that?
Yeah, that's a lot of what we do, actually. There's actually computer models, and we have a reproductive specialist and also a genetic advisor that helps us in that regard. But what we do is we look at the genetics using a computer model, so we can figure out the amount of inbreeding that would be produced by any possible pairing of any of the two animals in the program. And by doing that, we can figure out which animals each year, each kit, kits that are born each year, we save a certain amount back. Not all will go for a release, because we have to, keep the population constant. Some of our older animals will go out as exhibit animals, or they'll pass away. So in order to keep the population constant, we have to, keep a certain number back. But yeah, there's a computer program that we look at, and so we're able to get a numerical value for the amount of inbreeding. Basically, it's a mean kinship value of those animals, and our goal is to, keep as much genetic diversity as we possibly can. There's not a whole lot to work with, since there was such a small population, that was found on the ranch. We didn't have a whole lot to work with initially, but we're trying to do what we can to maintain, what they have.
Excellent. And Susan is curious, is there a pretty good survival rate for ferrets that are released in the wild?
Yeah, I think, one of the release guys coming on later will probably give you better figures, but for the ferrets, they're nowhere near the top of the food chain. I mean, they're preyed upon real heavily by other animals, coyotes, badgers, birds of prey. I've heard it said that they have to kill a prairie dog about once every 3 days in order to survive. And so when they go out and look for release sites, they have to look for areas where there's no active plague, which is probably the biggest challenge, with these guys, but also a suitable density of prairie dogs, so that they don't have to spend all night, running, across the prairie looking for a prairie dog, because the more time they are out there above ground, the more likely they are to be preyed upon themselves. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I've heard, if they can make it a few years, they're doing good.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I know. I was another road trip story of mine. I was driving back to Colorado from Salt Lake City, and along US 40, and I actually saw a black-footed ferret on the side of the road. It was craziest thing. But I work at the museum, and obviously we have the black-footed ferrets there, so I'm very familiar with what they look like, and it was definitely one out in western Colorado. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, I think you both well, actually, we heard Julie's story of finding the ferrets, but perhaps you might have another favorite story about ferrets. And Guy, if you have a favorite story about ferrets, I think that'd be fun to hear about.
Sure. One of my favorite memories as a child, a 10-year-old, was when I got to go out at night and spotlight. And the very first time I saw those emerald green eyes, it was very, very exciting. Several years ago, our sister was battling cancer, and we actually got to visit the Black-footed Ferret Center, and we got the full tour from Kimberly, and I learned so much just about that captivity program. It's just amazing. I never really wanted to be a scientist, but the black-footed ferret, would make me want to actually learn more, even as an adult. I loved learning about just that whole program from the time they're just teeny tiny up to when they actually take them out. I also was able to have Kimberly bring, oh my gosh, I can't remember the ferret's name. Cody, when she was coming up for something with the museum in Cody and then the one in Meeteetse, she actually brought the ferret, and we did like a little lecture with some of the like 4th and 5th graders. That was very exciting. Probably my favorite moment with black-footed ferrets, though, was when we released them back on the family ranch, and I got to be part of that. And just knowing that I guess I played am playing a small part in making sure that they don't ever get to that point of being on the endangered species list. It's pretty powerful and pretty exciting.
That's awesome. What about you, Guy? Got a favorite story?
Yeah, I tell you what, I've got several, but kind of the highlight was a few years ago where I actually went out to Julie's parents' ranch. The SSP working group meeting, our annual meeting, was in Meeteetse. It was a wonderful meeting. They had it right down, at the museum there, and we had a field trip, and we went out to your parents' place and went out to the area where they found, the last ferrets, and that's, sacred ground right there. So that was nice. And prior to that, I've been out a few times spotlighting and taking ferrets out for release, and that's really rewarding. For people that work with animals, that's about as good as you can get when you can put it back into their native habitat. So
that's awesome.
And actually, I just thought of one more. So it would have been the 30th anniversary. They did a big event in Meeteetse, and at the time my dad was living in the nursing home, but I was able to go get him, and we spent the whole weekend at the little motel there, and taking him out back up there on the ranch, and then having him listen and then talk to people. It was so special, and he was mid 80s when we did that, and so just watching him and talk to people, and then he got to sign posters in the museum, and he was just like a little old celebrity. And anybody that knew John Hogg, he was pretty short, just this little cute old man. And then when he got to unveil the big display in Meeteetse in the museum, watching him do that, it was really special just to get to have that time with him, and then watch him kind of be the little celebrity. So that's probably my favorite memory.
That's awesome. So I think you both mentioned spotlighting, and for anyone who is not familiar with that, Guy, do you want to just give us a quick rundown of what spotlighting is?
Sure. Basically, during the fall and basically in the winter, they'll go out across the prairie with trucks and high-powered lights. And what you do is you'll shine the light across the prairie. And if you see an animal above ground that has an emerald green eye shine, then you'll know it's a ferret. So what they usually do is they go out, once they figure out that there's a ferret in a particular hole, they'll set up a transponder reader, which is a little electronic device. Before the ferrets are actually sent out for release, they have a little electronic chip transponder that's put underneath their skin. And so they put a little donut shaped reader right over the hole there. So when the ferret pops up, they can get a numerical, value for that ferret, or they'll know that it's one that, hasn't been transponded. It's amazing though, if you're out in the middle of the night, how many things look like a ferret, even a spider on a fence. Well, it seems like it's green eyes, in the middle of the night, but it's pretty rewarding. There's a lot of animals, active in the middle of the night out there. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a couple of questions that I'm going to kind of combine into one. So a couple of different people want to know, what's the most exciting thing about managing a captive breeding center? And then what is also the biggest challenge in managing a captive breeding center?
Well, I think the biggest reward, is definitely, being able to put them back out into the native habitat. That's why we do it. That's immensely rewarding. As far as the challenge goes, is that, as I mentioned, all of the founder stock came from such a small population. They really don't have a lot of disease resistance, a lot of genetic variability, and as a result, the sperm quality on the males is not very good. And so it can be a real challenge. When we put the ferrets together for breeding, we have to check the females periodically. We do a flush of the female, and then we stain a slide, look for a certain percentage of a certain type of cell. Then we know she's ready to be bred, and we put her together with a male. Prior to that, we have to check all the males periodically. We actually have to palpate their testicles to see if they're developed. We have to wait a certain period of time after they developed, to make sure that they're been firm long enough. And we also do electroejaculation on the males to get an evaluation, so we can kind of track each year, where the males are as far as the percent mobility and normal sperm and any kind of abnormalities. But yeah, once we do that and put them together, we actually keep them together. We have a monitor, and we can check and see what's going on. We'll go ahead and do a sperm check, after they separate, and then check the female about a week later, make sure she has ovulated. And even doing all of that, we're lucky if we get 50% of the females to whelp. It's gone down over the years. We're still doing the same thing, but it's definitely a challenge. Because we don't have any more diversity, we can't bring any more animals in. There's some thoughts of being able to do some genetic stuff down the road, but right now we're not at that point. So,
excellent. Well, that's about our time for Guy and Julie. But don't go anywhere if you're watching. We do have our next two experts coming up in just a moment here. But I just want to thank both of you for being on the program tonight and answering all of our questions. And hopefully we'll see you again at some point in the future.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Have a good night. All right, everyone. We are ready to bring on our next two experts. Here we have Kimberly Frazier and Aaron Meyer. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So why don't we go ahead and start with some brief introductions. And Kimberly, you're to my side here. Yes, I pointed the right direction this time. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having us. So I work at the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center, which is located north of Fort Collins. And I do the outreach for the program. And I've been with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who runs the program for 10 years. So I have the best job on the planet because I get to travel around and talk about ferrets.
Yeah, right. Cool. And Aaron, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Aaron Meyer. I work for the City of Fort Collins Natural Areas Department. I've been working for the department for 12 years now. And my title is wildlife ecologist, so that my duties include just managing all the wildlife programs and projects, kind of understanding what species we have out there, and in some cases what species are not, and the condition of their habitat, how those two kind of the habitat condition and population conditions, how those relate to one another, and collect data and information on those things. And then I share that with management. We have a botanist as well and a vegetation management specialist. So all of our kind of field work and data collection funnels up through management, and that's how the department makes management decisions on the ground related to restoration or just kind of everyday operations. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here. And yeah, hopefully we'll get some fun questions coming in the comments. But we did have some questions come in earlier that I think one or both of you might be able to answer a little bit. And I think one that we were still curious about is, where do ferrets get their water from if there's no water sources nearby? And Guy may have addressed this already, but yeah, I just thought I'd give you guys a chance.
Do you want me to take that, Kim?
Whoever wants to jump in.
It's actually Kim and I's second time today talking about all the things ferret, Blackfoot ferret wise. And so we were working with some students earlier, and they had all kinds of great questions. They asked the same thing. So
nice.
Prairie dogs get water, moisture from vegetation, and then ferrets then get their water from their prey. So I think it was Guy kind of hit on that. So yeah, he was right on line with that. So they'll get all their water needs through consumption of their prey. And my friend Kimberly here has a theory that sometimes that ferrets consume prairie dogs not necessarily because they're hungry, but maybe it's because they're thirsty. So interesting theory, So because it is a very dry climate environment, shortgrass prairie. So
definitely. Now you're with Aaron, you're with the City of Fort Collins Natural Areas, and we've had a number of releases of ferrets around. Can you talk a little bit about those releases and where they have happened? And yeah. Sure,
of course. So our program project started in 2014, and that means that we met the requirements that Fish and Wildlife Service sets forth to host a reintroduction site and releases. And so kind of just very baseline, if you're a black-tailed prairie dog site, that you need at least 1,500 acres of black-tailed prairie dogs in a conservation zone. And so, we had our first releases in 2014 and continued all the way through 2019. And we have released 121 individuals across those years. 89 of those were kits and 36 were adults. So we typically do that in the fall, August, September, October, and then we'll do like a 30-day post monitoring effort to try to get an idea how many of those individuals survived. So, and that's Guy kind of primed us on a few things, and we do that via spotlighting with spotlights on top of our trucks, and so yeah.
Kimberly, maybe you can talk about the program overall and the survival rate of ferrets in the wild. You guys have a statistic on that?
Yeah, next year is the 40th anniversary of what Julie talked about, the Rediscovery. Prior to that, we thought they were extinct twice. And so the recovery program is a pretty unique program in the conservation world. We have over 50 partners from state, federal, tribal, NGOs, and private landowners that participate in the recovery of the species. And I just want to say what a really special for everybody that has tuned in to have Guy Graves, Julie Hogg and Aaron Meyer here to tell us about what their part in the program, because we could not do it alone. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we oversee the program, but it's really our partners that make the effort for recovery. And so I love to hear Guy's stories. He's part of the AZA SSP that's involved in the captive breeding. Julie, like she said, she was 10 years old. Little did she know that this, mustelid was going to make her family, as well as the town of Meeteetse, so famous in the conservation world. And then Aaron represents the future, the Soapstone natural area and the city of Fort Collins has recently, compared to many other partners, come on board. And so it's just a great representation tonight of what it takes when humans come together in an effort to recover a species. And it's a cool species. I will say that, very charismatic. They're mustelids. They'll take your face off. You can't, you always want to kind of handle them and you can't, but it's really due to our partners that we need to thank and appreciate everything that they do in the efforts, not only in captive breeding and reintroduction, but also plague management. Plague is the biggest challenge we have now, and we have some really fantastic partners working on that, as well as other areas in the program. So it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Aaron, did you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to echo a couple of things that Kimberly was just saying, that since I've been a part of this project and I've gone to like the yearly meetings, I've just been so impressed with everybody. As Kim mentioned, there's like all kinds of different partners everywhere, from the federal government all the way down to private landowners. And then, the city of Fort Collins, the citizens should be very proud of like their program, because we're the only municipality that's at the table, really. So that's really a unique kind of, designation or representation, but
yeah,
I've just been, some of the people involved in this project are like famous in the wildlife world. So like, I first walked in the room, I was like, oh my God, that's like so-and-so and that's so-and-so. So, but everybody's just very down to earth, because what they care about is recovering the species. Like there's no ego there. And so it's just been really a treat to be a part of the whole, the greater effort, because it goes from the northern border down to the southern border. So yeah, I just wanted to
awesome. Yeah. Thank you. That's great. And Kimberly, I was going to ask you about the ferrets on the hog ranch. Do you know if those are still around there?
They are. Julie said, it had been 35 years since the rediscovery in 2016. And that habitat, the prairie plague, had really chewed up that habitat. So we could not put ferrets back there. But in 2016, it was healthy. They had plenty of prairie dogs. And so we took back 35 ferrets and released them. And it was a huge celebration. I think everybody in the town came out. We drove into Meeteetse with these ferrets, and it was quite a celebration. And I might add, Julie talked about her mother wanting to take that first ferret and have it mounted and put on their mantle. And we actually did that. We had a ferret mounted, not that same ferret. We had another ferret mounted, took it to Meeteetse for the celebration. Our director of Fish and Wildlife Service at that time, and our regional director, presented the hog family with the mount. Aww. And to this day, it sets on, because John is gone, John Hogg is gone, Lucille Hogg is gone. Thank goodness we still have Julie to tell the story. But the ranch is still owned by John and Lucille's son, Alan, and his wife, Chris. And so that ferret sets on their mantle today. And they do outreach. They travel around. They even went back to Washington, D.C. for a congressional reception, talking about black-footed ferrets. And, that's pretty special to have landowners that are willing to step forward and talk about having an endangered species on their land and what that means. So, you may have to wait 35 years, but it goes comes around, and we made a full circle on that one. And it's So the ferrets in Matiti. So since then, typically they release ferrets on a site for 3 years to kind of build up the population. They only live 1 to 3 years in the wild, 7 to 8 in captivity. But they're doing okay. They're doing surveys. I know when we had the first kits born there the next year, we were really woohoo, and but again, plague is on the landscape, and that is a real challenge for us. It's the biggest challenge to recovery of the black-footed ferret is sabbatic plague. So they're doing okay. Wish they were doing better, but we pretty much say that about all sites. We have 30 reintroduction sites in 8 of the 12 states, which is the home range. We've also put ferrets in Canada and Mexico. So for such a little mustelid, it has quite a range where you can find them.
Excellent. And I think you kind of touched on this, but we have another audience question that says, do black-footed ferrets tend to stay in the area that you release them in, or will they wander into new areas?
Well, Erin can talk about soapstone, but typically the females are the ones that set up a home territory area for themselves, and that can be anywhere between 180 and 200 acres. It's quite large for the size that they are. The males will then typically roam around, a couple females areas and whatnot. So when you have a reintroduction site, you really need thousands of acres to have a healthy group of ferrets. Do you want to talk about soapstone a little bit?
Yeah, I would just say, just echo what Kim just said as far as the behavior of the two different sexes. And, it's challenging because they're very hard to monitor just because of their life history. They are nocturnal. They're fossorial, which means that they spend most of their time underground. Approximately like 90% is what's thought. And so, we've released a lot of the individuals, but it is really hard to monitor them and kind of understand their movement patterns and whatnot. And so what we're really aided by is those transponders that Guy was talking about. And it's a little pit tag. It's about the size of a grain of rice. And so if the individual has come from the national center where Kimberly works, they're ready to go. They hit the ground with the pit tag. And then if there's any wild-born individuals, which is what we're ultimately shooting for, that's what we want, is a population that's sustaining itself, hopefully. We have to trap those individuals and then put a pit tag on them, and then also we vaccinate them as well. So, our assumption is that the animals that we have kind of follow the same kind of movement patterns, but it can be challenging because one thing that I get concerned about sometimes is because we won't really know the status of a particular prairie dog colony and how many ferrets are there, because you can go a couple monitoring efforts and not make any observations, but that doesn't mean ferrets aren't there. So I worry sometimes about putting ferrets on top of ferrets, and then there might not be enough room for everybody, and then they do have to disperse. And there are some areas that they can disperse to, because we want that at the same time too. Eventually, we want to have enough black-tailed prairie dog colonies in the landscape so that everybody can kind of do a little bit of this moving around. Yeah, it's just kind of challenging to monitor their movement. Also because the physiology of the animal, like you can't put your more traditional, like a collar, like you put on an elk or maybe some other carnivore.
Yeah.
It's just like this tube pretty much. And because they're also underground all the time. So we don't want to apply some kind of device that's going to then compromise their ability to survive and whatnot. So, but there's some ideas out there on how to improve monitoring. And one that I think is really exciting is the use of scent dogs. So there's some encouraging kind of developments around scent dogs and whatnot. And also, it's really hard for humans to completely flip their activity and move into ferret world for a week. I mean, it just totally flips your world because you're operating under a nocturnal kind of schedule. So it can really be challenging to kind of maintain through all that. But I think Guy was mentioning this as well. At nighttime, the prairie's alive. And there's all kinds of things that you would see that you wouldn't normally see. And so it's this really unique opportunity, I think, I feel really fortunate to like get to experience every year. But, you know, the scent dogs you can use during the day, so you don't have to use staff. And so it's a lot of effort, and people are always, the passion I was talking about, the people involved are always trying to find, you know, no one's just sitting on their hands like, oh, cool, we have a few tools. We're good with that. Everyone's just always trying to figure out how to do things a little bit better. So it inspires me. I think it kind of keeps that energy going, you know, so.
Yeah, you know,
awesome.
and people always want to know, well, how many ferrets are in the wild? You know, how many are out there? And between Guy talking about how difficult or the challenges in captive breeding, Aaron talking about counting, you know, going out and doing surveys, you know, not only is it at night, but you're looking for a solitary nocturnal small species that lives on massive, you know, acres of land. So how do you find them? You know, it's worse than a needle in the haystack. But, you know, we do find them in surveys, and it's great when we find wild-born. But the key factor is actually looking at habitat, because if your habitat is healthy with the, you know, the proper or the number of prairie dogs and you have an active prairie, ferrets are going to do well. They're going to, their numbers are going to increase exponentially. And we do have some sites, for instance, Rocky Mountain Arsenal, that is very intensive, as well as the city of Fort Collins, in managing for plague. And those ferrets have done extremely well. In fact, in Rocky Mountain Arsenal, we've been able to translocate some of those wild-born ferrets in the last I think 4 years to other locations. And ultimately that's the goal of the program, that they're doing so well in the wild that you can translocate wild-borns. Because even though the captive bred ones, you know, we precondition them and that increases survival by 10-fold, they, you know, wild-borns, born in the dirt, raised in the dirt, they don't miss a beat. And so ultimately, not that we want to lose our jobs, but we want to do well enough that the species is doing well enough. And it's really due to our partners and making that effort. And you can see, you know, Aaron has great passion. You know, Guy, we didn't say this, but Guy is actually retiring this year. And it's quite a loss to lose that institutional knowledge that he has. You know, we always say we hope people write books, but and Julie needs to write a book too about, you know, the hawk history. And Aaron should probably write it. Everybody should write a book.
There you go. Just a big book.
It's fabulous, yeah, to have people that have passion for saving this species.
Excellent. And you touched on this, but we have an audience question about the preconditioning of the ferrets. I'm trying to find it now. Oh yes, do ferrets need to be trained prior to release, or do they rely on their instincts regarding hunting and living in burrows?
Yeah, I'm going to
talk a little bit about that.
So when the program first started with Wyoming Game and Fish, and then they cold released them. They would release them straight from cages, and survival was really quite poor. And then a great biologist and scientist who continues to work today on ferret recovery, Dean Biggins, went down to Pueblo in Colorado and saw, and they set up pens and they put ferrets in there, and they really delve into what it would take to precondition ferrets. And what he came up with, and this was back in the 90s, to this day we use his protocols. So the ferrets are put into large 40 by 40 pens on the prairie. They're put out there with their litter mates and their mom, the dam. And they're out there for a minimum of 30 days. And during that time, they understand and they learn how to navigate the burrow systems. They're given a live prairie dog. They have to learn how to kill that prairie dog. It's the sights and the smells of the prairie, the wind. We have raptors that come to the preconditioning pins and perch above. You know, we set on prairie dog. You know, actually Meadow Springs Ranch is where the captive breeding center is. So they hear the prairie dog, and it increases survival by tenfold. And like Aaron said, you might not always find ferrets that you release that year, the following year, but we have found ferrets sometimes 3 years after they've been released, and all of a sudden there they are. So I think with counting ferrets in the wild, your glass is either half full or half empty. And I always like to say our glass is so full it spills over on the table, because ferrets are out there. It's our problem that we can't find them. And hopefully we'll come up with some new techniques, technology that can help us do that. But they're out there, and how wonderful to know that they're out there.
Nice. How about a drone that could fly at night with an infrared like heat detection system?
Yes, that we have some partners that are working on that. Unfortunately, because they're fossorial, they spend 90% of their time probably underground. It won't travel. Your red won't travel that deep. So raptors have similar eye shine, so it's not a simple question. It's not a easy answer to come up with.
Well,
but we have
maybe
capacity. We are sound ferrets. So,
Yeah, maybe someone out there watching right now might have a good idea. So if you do, feel free to post it in the comments and we will pass it along. So we've got another question here from Susan on Facebook. She wants to know, do black-footed ferrets hibernate?
We'll let Aaron take that.
I wouldn't say there's a form of hibernation called torpor. And that's just when it's similar to hibernation, the breathing, the whole just kind of body system slows down. So, and blacktails will do that as well, the prey item. So, or prey species. But so if we get like a big snow, they might go into something like that. So it's called torpor, TORPOR. I hate spelling out loud. It's like,
I can't spell either.
Awesome. And Melissa would like to know, are there any opportunities for volunteers to come and help with the program in any way?
Yeah, there are some opportunities right now, as I'm sure no one's really surprised with COVID. We're really cranking down on even how our staff is operating during monitoring. So a lot of times you will monitor with a second person because, like I mentioned, you're on this crazy time shift and it just makes things easier for some people. But we're only doing a single person to each vehicle, and we're even changing how we work with the animals a little bit. So maybe again one day, a lot of times we try to extend those opportunities more towards for students. So we have a few professors at Front Range Community College, and then also we reach out to some CSU students sometimes too. But we have a more close relationship with Front Range, and we generally get a really great response from those students. So that kind of lines up really well because we're trying to give them some professional experience, and it's quite the project to get experience on too. Like I know as a young biologist, if I was putting that on my resume, I would have been pretty psyched about it. So, so yeah, I think there's some opportunities. I'm not sure when that will return. I guess we'll just kind of see how the craziness goes from here.
Yeah.
And at the Ferret Center, we have 12 staff, and which includes 3 to 4 seasonals, which are part-time, that get us through the kit season. So I always encourage students and college biologists that if you have an interest in wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the best agency I think out there to work for. Their whole goal is the ESA and preserving species in this country and around the world. So you can apply for jobs on USA Jobs. It's a great site to go to and just get your toes wet and see what's out there. But again, this is trying times for all of us. And, with what's going on with humans, the COVID has kind of put a damper on things. But, if you have an interest in wildlife and nature, do it. Every species has the right to live on this planet. And to be a part of that is pretty special. So
Definitely. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and we had a question come in earlier that I definitely wanted to get to. And the question is for both of you: what is your funniest release story?
Okay. Well, yeah. So,
or exciting, maybe.
Ted Turner owns a ranch in New Mexico called Vermejo, and it is spectacular. And so we went up there, and we were putting ferrets at this part in Vermejo at almost 10,000 feet. So not only do they live in Canada and Mexico, and they don't hibernate, but they live the range is 12 western states, but you can find them at 9,000 and some odd feet. That's pretty high. And so we were at this site releasing ferrets, and it was a small area where these prairie dog colony was, but then it went down the valley to a larger area. And I was with a partner from USGS, and she was so excited to release her ferret, and she opened the door, and the ferret just took off. It just took off in the woods. And she was screaming, which made the ferret freak out even more.
Oh, no.
Luckily, ferrets, I almost think he or she, can't remember, smelled the prairie dogs, because it kind of did this little detour and got back to the colony. But it was like, oh my, we're going to have, this ferret lost and ferrets, when they come through the program, a ferret is worth thousands of dollars, about $5,500, I think. So I thought, well, my boss is going to love that. I took a ferret to the woods, but it came back. So that's not really funny, but when you release ferrets, that's thinking of, ferret, in the woods is kind of funny. So.
Yeah.
Aaron probably has a better story.
Well, I wouldn't call it like funny necessarily, but I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old boys, and so they've been on releases, and I don't know, like when I was watching them do it, I was like, here are my sons like releasing Blackfoot ferrets on the, it's kind of like, is this a dream or what's up? So I just think like what an incredible opportunity. I don't know, not how many people in the world have released a Blackfoot ferret into the wild to kind of like get that process going of restoration, and so and it's just every time it's really, really special, and just kind of like I sometimes like recap that for people when we're out there, like you just did this thing, and like how amazing. So a little bit more sentimental. I'm kind of like that anyway. So.
And I want to plug in for you, Ben, at the museum. There are 24 display facilities across the country. If ferrets don't meet a certain criteria, they are not released into the wild. Their teeth have to be there. Their eyesight has to be good. And then if they can't be released into the wild, they go to a display facility. And so I encourage people, if you have a chance to see a live black-footed ferret, do it. Most Americans will never get to see one of the most endangered mammals in North America. If you want to see a grizzly bear or a wolf, you can go to Yellowstone National Park and see them in the wild. But where do you go to see a black-footed ferret? And the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery is the only museum in the world to have 2 live black-footed ferrets. So I encourage you, no matter where you are, locate a display facility and go see them. And if you're in Fort Collins, call the museum, make your reservations. They're open 3 days a week, and come see those 2 ferrets. Their names are Patty Ann and Stevie Nicks, and they're a lot of fun to even if they're sleeping because they're nocturnal, you'll get to see a live black-footed ferret, and that is worth it.
Yeah, and I also want to add that we do have some live streaming webcams on those black-footed ferrets as well. So you can visit our website. I'm posting the link in the comments right now, but you can go spy on those ferrets. And like Kimberly said, they might be asleep. You might have to stay up late at night to see them get up and be active, because they are nocturnal, but it's always fun to peek in on them and see what they're up to. So.
Oh, I've had people tell me I couldn't sleep, so I got up and those ferrets were rocking and rolling at 2:00 until sunrise, and had coffee and watched the ferrets because they really are active early morning hours. Yeah, and then, but they're special.
They are.
Awesome.
Well, what's that? Sorry.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
of course. And I was going to say, we are at the end of our time tonight, but thank you both for being on the program, Discovery Live, Ask an Expert. It was a pleasure to speak with you and to relay our audience questions to you. Hopefully you guys continue doing your amazing work with ferrets, and I'm sure we will see you again at some point in the future.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great evening.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. And for everyone else out there watching, thank you so much for joining us for Discovery Live, Ask a Scientist. Once again, if you did enjoy tonight's program, please do consider making a donation to the museum so that we can continue to bring these programs to you. If you're watching on Facebook, you can do that with the little donate button down below. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can also visit our website at fcmod.org/donate. Once again, we are a nonprofit organization, so we really appreciate any support that you guys can give to us to be able to continue to bring these awesome programs to you. And again, my name is Ben Gondres from the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. Thank you all so much for joining me, and be sure to join us again for future live stream programs. Next week, we will have a Night Skies of Fort Collins talk hosted by myself again, where I'll tell you all about what you can find in the night skies above Fort Collins. So we'll see you next time. Have a great night, everyone.